My sisters and brothers, may the Lord give you peace. Thank you for joining us. There is a lot to talk about today, so let's get to it. First of all, you cannot help but notice in the Gospels, you can't help but being struck on how central healing was to the Jesus's ministry. There is something like 41 recorded healings, 1/5 of the Gospel. So for nearly 2,000 years, Jesus has been known as the great physician. And yet we've made Jesus into someone who's always about correcting sin and evil. There really isn't, that's really not evident that much in the Gospels. Yeah, there are a few occasions, but we've taken it so out of context that the result, we've created a faith that is more sin-saturated than anything else. Jesus is much more, as in both cases here, not about going to where the sin is to correct it. He's going to where there is suffering. That's the story of his whole life. And if Jesus is the image of God, then what does that tell us? God cares about human suffering. God never says, well, put up with it and you'll be rewarded in heaven. No, God is concerned about human pain and suffering now. So the gospel begins with a synagogue leader whose name we are told is Jairus. And of course, synagogue leader means what? Wealth and power. And what does the wealth and power of this wealthy and powerful man do? He falls down on his knees at the feet of Jesus. Now remember, this is not the Jesus we have come to know 2,000 years later. This Jesus is the carpenter's son. This Jesus is from a little backward town, an itinerant preacher from the hills of Kentucky. My apologies if you're from Kentucky, a town of your choice. That is who he is. And this wealthy, powerful man begs him, if you just come and lay your hands on my daughter, she will be healed. We then meet a woman who is suffering with hemorrhaging. For how many years? 12. Did you catch that? How old was the girl? 12. How many years she'd been suffering? Trying to point out that for someone's lifetime on earth, another person's been suffering that long. Now, compare her to the synagogue official. What is his name? Jairus. What is her name? She's nameless. He's rich and powerful. She has nothing left. She spent all she had without being any the better for it. In fact, she's gotten worse. Sounds like a lot of stories today. But she's heard about Jesus and concludes, if I can touch his clothing, I shall get well again. And remember, her touch had the power of defilement. And she would have had to brace herself for the crowd's revulsion. Immediately aware that power had gone out of him, Jesus turns around in the crowd, which must have been like a crowd in New York City's Penn Station at rush hour, or trying to make your way through the Allentown Art Festival. And he just said, whoa, who touched me? And I love the disciples' line. You can see the crowd pressing in on you when you ask, who touched me? Basically, they're saying, are you kidding? But what Mark wants to communicate here is Jesus' life as energy, healing as energy. Eastern religions speak a lot about energy. We're uncomfortable with that. And yet, what's the spirit? I think our domesticating the gospel and growing comfortable with Christianity has contributed to our losing touch with the knowledge of the world of energy. We need to get back to that what we really relate to in one another is energy. We relate to one another as energy. But most of us haven't been given eyes to see that. For example, two people can give, let's say, the exact same homily. You'll be attracted to one and not really like the other. The exact same homily, exact same words. See, what we're responding to in other people is their energy, various degrees of positive energy, life energy, or angry energy, death energy, fear energy, toxic energy. And you can see whether they are energetic people or fearful people, angry people. Their face is saying it, their gestures are saying it, their bodily stance is saying it. It's coming through all over, and we never read it. And that's what we need to be trained in. Training people to be readers of energy and discerners of energy, trying to help people see that what's preventing the positive and healing energy from flowing through us and out to others is very often fear. And I think that is why the Lord is constantly calling us beyond fear, because fear blocks that flow of energy and healing energy. What drew this woman to Jesus was she perceived that the flow of life in him and through this man was so radical. It gave her the courage to take the step that for 12 years she's been ashamed to take. She reached out to connect herself deeply to another person's flow of life. And because of her courage and because of that trust in herself and her trust in him, he says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. You did it." You catch that? And she went from being a generic woman in all our eyes to who she is in the eyes of God. He says, "Daughter." In a few minutes, we will pray, "Our Father." Isn't that a call to be ready to recognize when we say those words, "Our Father," that every man, woman, and child is a daughter or son of God, a brother and a sister? But most important with regards to this healing, Jesus crosses boundaries. It's what good energy does. This was a shocking story when first told. Mark is showing Jesus dealing openly with a woman in public. Even rabbis didn't speak to their wives in public. Okay, and he's dealing compassionately with a female condition that was taboo. Menstruating women were considered ritually unclean and thus excluded from temple ritual gatherings. Menstruating women were considered sexually unclean, so husbands had to stay away. And in biblical writings, a menstruating woman is used as a symbol of idolatry. So this poor woman sums up everything unclean in Judaism, but here, don't miss this. And what does Jesus do? He brushes away the purity codes and distinctions of gender, which I think are so important for our time today, telling us she had never been an unclean woman, but a daughter of God who was suffering. While he was still speaking, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any longer?" Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid, just have faith." And you want to say, Jesus, it's a broken record. Do you have another line? But it's always his line. How many times do we hear that in the Bible? Trust in the Lord. How many times do not be afraid? Some say 365 times, one for every day of the year. In all circumstances, in all the ups and downs, but above all, at the moment of death. Because this trust turns the terror of death into falling asleep. We should print it over every church door in the world. Do not be afraid. Have faith. Because Jesus said it more than he said anything else. And yet, isn't fear the primary demon controlling the world right now? And people feed that fear by calling other people vermin, infectious, rapists. The people of the world are dominated by fear. Even the Christian people who should know better, after all Jesus' teachings, we too are often under fear. And what is it all that those people in their commotion, that those people, all the commotion, the weeping and the wailing, they symbolize all the people in the world trapped in fear. And they laugh at him, and he puts them out. Why? Because God's energy cannot be released with this kind of silliness, with this kind of shallowness. God's energy can't do anything. Probably the last lesson for today with regards to Jesus' interaction with this little girl is that love can reach into the afterlife. My prayer for another, my love for another, my gratitude for another can still be part of his or her life. We talk about having a mass for the dead. I don't like that. It's not about having a mass for the dead. They are not masses for the dead, but masses with the dead. The dead can give to us, and we can give to them. The church on earth celebrates with the church in heaven. Yes? It's never too late to touch the love of another or be touched by the love of another. My brothers and sisters, may we be like Jairus, be moved to ask for God's blessing for others. May we, like the woman who had been sick for 12 years, be courageous enough to reach out and touch, to reach out and believe, to reach out and seek healing where we might need it most. And may we be especially like Jesus, so compassionate we bring people back to life. Amen.